And Metal Jensen, welcome to the stream. Just moving the microphone around as best I can, so that I sound as best as I can. Hope everyone is having a fantastic one this Wednesday, and possibly Tuesday, depending on where you are. Good morning, Alex. Morning, Kandaria. Hope you're doing well. Just tickety-tacking on the stream to make sure everything's working. Alright. Notifications all sent out. Okie dokie, that's that. Now we need to copy this over to there. And then we're done. We're done. Good morning, Grant and Nick. 3 in the morning, and that's definitely not the bestest of times. Excuse me. Alright. I think that is all the clickety-clacking I need to do. Well, let's have a look-see. Well, it's sunny, but there's just a planet in the way. It's a minor inconvenience. Morning, Shadow. Morning, Nick. Machias Azrael. Good morning. Good morning. Got a bit of a headache today. It's still lingering from the heat stroke from 2 days ago. Well, mild heat stroke. It's amazing how long it takes to recover. Oh, stretch. And coffee. We've got coffee. Oh. Yeah, I've been drinking tons of water. I normally drink several liters a day. But even then, it takes a couple days to recover. Morning, Anthony. Hope you're doing well. Yamashisha, same to you. No, you haven't missed anything. We've just started having the pre-narration chit-chat. We had to admit... Hold on. But that's all besides the point. Okay. We didn't even finish the, accidentally adopted. Even the power grid was looking forward to the ending, so much so that it decided to stop and listen while I recorded the last chapter. Veterans. Also, BAs who also happened to be veterans. Okay, so that's where the power grid crashed. Look, heat stroke in southern Africa is pretty much the same. So, what was it? Tuesday? Monday? Monday. It was a Monday. We did a 14-kilometer hike to go get some stuff from the shops. And it was midday. So if I did that in South Africa, I would be in hospital. Not joking, not overblowing it out. If you're walking around for 5 hours, 4 hours in the South or African sun, you're heading to an emergency room. Annex, what I would do is I'd put a ball on a table and then just say, this is Schrodinger's cat, or this is for Schrodinger's cat. At some point in the future, this may or may not be knocked off the table by Schrodinger's cat. That'll either get you full marks or get you 0. 14, not 40. But yeah. So that is in miles, I think 8 miles. Kilometers to miles. 8.6 miles. But I mean, if we were in South Africa, I would have refused to walk in the midday sun, regardless of what we would need. I mean, I've many times gotten sunstroke and heat stroke in South Africa. It's not fun. You must construct an alien with adaptations for the planet it is on. You can take that pretty much anywhere, I think. Find a flat rock and say that it's a super heavy gravity world. And call it a troll. It turns out the... Or get a carpet and lie it down and say this is from a super heavy gravity world, and this is a skyscraper. Happened to be that. Look, I almost didn't make it out of school, so I'm not the right person to ask. Although, in high school, I don't think we did any projects like that. We did physics and chemistry projects. But when I went to school in a very weird time in South Africa. They changed the schooling system, the entire schooling system. And I was kind of in between the two different systems, so it was very weird for me. And everybody my age. Tardigrades of Saturn, sure. Cheers, Annex. Hope you have a good one, and I hope you do well in your project. Veterans. Heat stroke, when it hits hard. I remember we were doing something, and my brother-in-law was working with us, and he didn't drink anything, and he was just working and working and working. Eventually, I'm speaking to him, and I'm having the same conversation, literally. He's forgetting the beginning of the sentence, and then repeating himself. That was a borderline hospital visit. Once that sort of starts happening where you can barely stand and your brain just starts turning off. We just got him in cold water to cool the whole body down, and then just put as much liquid into him as could. Just get him to drink as much water as possible. And then gave it like a time. I was like, if it's not improving in the next 10 minutes, we're going to the hospital. But I've also, for me, I've got sunburn so bad that it blisters. This sun ain't no joke. Good morning, Bolt. Hope you're doing well. That's true. Not much of that happens. Well, actually, it does happen in the deserts in South Africa. But in general, it's difficult to freeze in South Africa. You have to be climbing a mountain. Good morning, Badger. Who also happened... Coffee is always good. Coffee is always good. Okie dokie. I'm gonna continue with this narration. We don't normally start narrations halfway through. But to be fair, the entire electrical grid did go tits up. So, also happened to be veterans. I haven't recorded anything more since then. So we'll head on to recording some more. We'll finish this off, which will be the epilogue of the Accidentally Adopted. And then we'll move over to the Human from a Dungeon. Also happened to be veterans. But that's all besides the point. The point is that Greg liked his quarters, and the family liked having him in the converted closet, so there was no reason to move. Yep. Talking a bit louder. Why am I talking a bit louder? Hello, hello, hello? Well, technically the ISP did quit. Also happened to be just the same as the rest of the country. Veterans. But that's all besides the point. No. We're talking louder than before. This is why... Well, This is a very good reason why you don't really want to record a single chapter over 2 days. Because as you can see, my waveforms are bigger, which means that there's more volume, which could simply just be the microphone's a bit closer. So normalizing between the two is possible, but you prefer to avoid it. Because as you can see, also happened to be, and you can hear the difference between the two VAs who also happened to be veterans. Because as you can see, testing 1 2 3 4 5 veterans. Veterans. Testing 1 2 3 to be veterans. Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1. Testing 1 2 3 4 5. Veterans. To be veterans. Testing 1 2 3 4 5. Dubs were done by third-rate VAs who also happened to be veterans. Testing 1 2 3 4 5. That's close. Testing 1. That's close. Close enough, I think. But that's all besides the point. The point is that Greg liked his quarters, and the family liked having him in the converted closet, so there was no reason to move. First, he checked. First, he checked in on his sister's cabin. Bit difficult to put the headphones on the top hat. First, test. Checked. Testing. First, he checked in on his sister's cabin. Linus did often go to her when he's gotten himself into trouble, probably hoping for an ally or just advice on how to face the inevitability. Probably hoping for an ally or just advice on how to face the inevitable. Usually, though, he would have been hiding from the captain, his father, since most of the rule-breaking Linus got up to wasn't related to the armory. In any case, Trandy was alone in her cabin, well, alone-ish. She was using a holodesk to attend a lecture on the treatment of combat PTSD. He unobtrusively closed the door and checked his brother's cabin. A mix of toys, Dart League ribbons and trophies, robotic parts and tools were haphazardly littered about in a system of organization that the boy insisted actually existed. Otherwise, the cabin was empty. Then he checked his own cabin. Without thinking, Greg said at ease when he saw the boy, who by then stood head and shoulders above him. Who by then stood head and shoulders over him, standing at attention. When Linus went to parade rest, it registered. You're practicing marching and drill? Yes, Linus answered as his face darkened. With the privates? Yes. Why did I say? What did I say about the privates? That they're all bored, clever, and have damaged common sense, and are best enjoyed from a distance. But you're goading them to make band. But you're goading them to make band robots, which you aren't supposed to know about, by the way. Instead, I didn't think they would actually make it. Privates have damaged what? Common sense. The teenager sighed. Come on, tell the orbit. All I said was that Bangy sounded funny. Cheers, Walt. Have a good one. All I said is that Bangy sounded funny. And you said this too? Private's pretty and bar band. Well, that explains that. Why are you hanging around with the privates anyway?
Well, he said as he shuffled his feet, I've been looking for my stars, and I want to be like you, Sneaky. I want to be a citizen. I want to save people like you did.
Linus, I was just a terrified kid doing what we had to. I was just a terrified kid doing what we had to. I was just a terrified kid doing what he had to. You don't want to be like that.
Linus scowled down at his older adopted brother and said, Stop saying things like that. There were other scared kids who could have done the same things that you did, but didn't. There were grown-ups who tried to do what you did, but couldn't. Even then, you always did more than just what you had to. You did the best thing that you could think of every time.
You read the book. You read the book. I have no idea what that sound was. You read the book, Greg said with a note of accusation in his voice.
Yes, I am old enough.
Which one?
The one you and that nice lady were working on after you got the poacher.
Gregory just nodded and said, Every civilian has the right to serve when they come of age. But you have to want it, really want to put other people in front of you. It could cost you your life, kid.
I know. But I still have a lot of time to think about it before I'm old enough to embark.
Trandy is going to be disappointed to leave the wee thing by herself.
No, Yag is going with her. He got accepted into the same school's nanosurgery program.
So they're leaving soon?
Sorry, they haven't told anybody yet. Sadie overheard them.
Gossiping little, well. You're going to apologize to the sergeants for reminding their privates that bad robot is something that can easily be made.
Yes, sir. Greg gave him a hug and sent him on his way. Then he sat and thought. Maybe I'll retire this commission after the next tour. Medical won't be giving up the wee thing, and Medical won't like giving up the wee thing as the MH-approved ship. But maybe I want to settle down, get married. Maybe I'll go to school to retrain, strike out on my own. Humans should have ships like these. And the ship kept sailing along her way, carrying various ambassadors from various star nations to various stations and planets, to discuss all sorts of things with humans, and Trevty filled the cargo holds with valuable goods to sell the next stop. And Trevty filled the cargo holds with valuable goods to sell at the next stop, while Trandy let Linus and Pendrell take over the bulk of the sneaky plushy business, which continued to be popular on both sides of the Gulf for various reasons. Meanwhile, Pops kept the ship running and looked forward to watching his adopted son drink what should be lethal amounts of alcohol when he told him that he was going to have another little sister. But the galaxy kept on turning, barely aware that it had turned just a little brighter. Somewhere else, another person woke up on a perfectly normal day with no reason to suspect that heroism, or perhaps compassion, or maybe uncanny luck, would be needed. And they just needed to be the one and they just needed to be the one to supply it. But that is a story for another time. End of chapter. End of story. If you've made it this far in the story, I highly suggest going back and updating all the chapters, if you are so inclined. I'd like to thank the author for giving me permission to read the story, and I'd like to thank you all for sticking around. It's been my pleasure. It has been my pleasure to narrate this for you. Yes, all that stress relief.
At least the painkillers are kicking in, because, of course, I also sprained my ankle. Messed up my leg a bit. Oh, it's the fans of the computer. Why are the fans of the computer making so much noise? GPU is running at 48 degrees. That should be fine. The CPU running at. CPU doesn't have a. No idea why the fans decided. No, the power's back on. I'm in Kira. Came back on 11 o'clock the same night. But we would. I mean, in theory, I could have streamed anyway because we have the solar, what do you call it? It's a camping solar setup, but like a serious camping solar setup with like 200. That's what I thought. I'm not losing my mind. Hello? 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 The simulated tape hiss is the microphone's flaw. Or it could be the fans. Or the music. Hello, hello, hello. That's a bit close. Hello, hello, hello. That should be fine. But as I was saying, we've got the camping solar setup, which I think is 100 amp hours with solar panels. So I could stream if I really wanted to, if it was going to take long. But thankfully, it was only out for 11 hours. Just give me a second, I'll be right back. Alright, back. My door is slightly open, so noise is coming in through there as well. Yep, my voice is trashed today. But not trashed in a way that's gonna damage it, just trashed in a way that doesn't sound great. Yeah, I just went to go close the door. I close it when I start streaming, but both the dog and cat open it. And then noise filters in. Yeah. That's probably not going to happen. I'm doing as well as can be, as sane. Each stroke takes a good couple days to get over. No, just close the door. Just close the door. He wandered out a while ago. Okay. Then it should be like that. I think. I'm waiting for the stream to catch up so I can see if this is aligned properly. Okay. There we go. Nope. Do we have it? Do we have it? I'm watching the YouTube stream. Okay. Okay. Problem is my OBS crashes the moment I put it on my second screen. So I need to use the actual YouTube stream to figure stuff out. One Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi, 6 Mississippi, 7 Mississippi. Yeah, it's about 7 seconds. That would be Twitch is about 7 seconds. Because Royal Road has different spacing and stuff, I need to use a different screen. Which I did set up. But in true stream fashion, doesn't mean anything. Okay. Transform, but it gives us time to relax and, well, relax. What are we doing? We're moving this over to 500. Okay, that worked. Then we are... Exciting stuff. Very riveting. He clicked the button with much angst, and stuff happened. There goes the fans on my computer again. Very annoying. Very annoying. I think it's probably built up dust, so I need to sort that out. No, I've got in-ear monitors. Problem is, they get uncomfortable after a while. Okay. So, crop left less. I'll take that to 100. $80. $225. Perfect. 50. That's good. That's good. 50. 400. Okay, we're almost there. Almost there. 450. I mean, why would software stay where it's supposed to stay? Does that work? Does that work? Okay. Think we're there? No. Okay. Exciting stuff. Moving screens around. Yippee! We're getting there, almost there. 125. Okay. There we go. There we go. Close the view over there. Oh. Yeah. Advert shouting after you to keep your attention. It is very not fun. The human from a dungeon 36. So we should be able to squeeze out all of them today. But we shall see. Ow, ow, headache, headache, headache. Oh, ow. I think we'll just do that. That way, next time we switch the screen around to the next chapter, I don't get blinded and archives and all that stuff. Give me a second. No idea who that was, but I'm waiting for delivery, so can't ignore it. Right. Okay. The noise should be... Testing, testing, testing. Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest narration of the web series The Human from a Dungeon. If you are new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 36. Master General Karain. Master General Karain Yith, Adventurer Level NA, Half-Breed Drow, Belushuni. Greetings, Alphanoob, hope you're doing well. Half-Breed Drow, Belushinian. What a wonderful night. I let out a happy sigh as I allowed the ambience to wash over me, enjoying the smells of swires and blood, the sounds of screaming in the distance, and the sight of drow tossing mangled corpses into the mass grave at the bottom of the hill. It's a rare treat to be rewarded so handsomely for such a meager task. Well, meager for me, at least. The orcs residing here had not wanted to let this village fall under our control, and had put up quite a fight. They'd had some forewarning as to our intentions, but we had managed to mask our movements and surprise them. Even so, took losses. Even so, we took losses. I watched General Smarm jog up the hill in my direction. "Reporting, sir," he said,
slightly out of breath. I'll have to ensure my officers participate in morning calisthenics with the soldiers. Not only will this improve their constitution, but it will improve the morale of the soldiers as well, which will ensure the soldiers will follow the more difficult orders when they're finally given. Get on with it, man, I replied. Yes, sir. He snapped at attention. He snapped to attention. Altris squads 2 and 4 have made contact with the enemy. Both skirmishes ended in our victory. We've taken 4 casualties and 2 deaths as a result of the action. And what of the enemy? 16 confirmed kills and 4 captors. The rest fled. On field in a suspicious manner. The squads did not pursue due to suspicions of an ambush. Their commanders will be punished at the Master General's pleasure. I couldn't help but smirk at the results of our fighting. The orcs were tough, disciplined, and crafty enemies, but they couldn't stand up to our formations. But they couldn't stand up to formations I'd fashioned. Shield walls and spears are well outside the wheelhouse of a standard orc commander, let alone hastily established village militia. Unfortunately, this success was likely to change somewhat when we begin to encounter regulars. The orcs we've been fighting aren't part of a greater military effort. For the most part, they're simply guards and farmers who've taken up weapons to try and drive us off. There's the occasional uppity adventurer, but even they can't find an entire phalanx. According to the literature that I gleaned the idea from, such maneuvers are vulnerable only to artillery, which is difficult to position during a skirmish, unless you lead your army into a pre-arranged position, of course. There is no need for punishment. They are likely correct in their assuming of this was a trap, and we have no reason to pursue the enemy when they flee at this point in the campaign. This is a land grab, not an extermination, I said as I casually pushed my hair from my eyes. But General Smarm glanced at the freshly ruined village. This is not an extermination either, General. We simply needed a more permanent base of operations and a source of labor, I explained. This village has food and water and will serve as a nexus between our forces and our supply lines for the rest of our campaign. Obviously, we can't have the populace trying to prevent the village's transformation into our nexus, which is why we killed those who wouldn't surrender or couldn't walk. Couldn't work. Rebels and spies would undermine our efforts. The general looked at me with doubt apparent in his expression. There are few things more offensive than having a dolt doubt you. What? Nice, Hussein, nice. The general looked at me with doubt apparent in his expression. There are few things more offensive than having a dolt doubt you. Would that I could carve that expression from his face. Feeling my fury flare, and knowing that this was not an appropriate time to free it, I took a deep breath in my mouth. I took a deep breath with my mouth and exhaled it through my nose. There are plenty of survivors, and all of the survivors that surrendered have been relegated to our labor force, I said with exasperation. Speaking of which, ensure that those that are captured during skirmishes are treated for any injuries they have. Once their treatment is complete, make sure that they join the labor force. That'll be all. Yes, sir, Smarm said before trotting off to carry out my orders. One may call it a mixed bag. One may call it a mixed blessing that King Lofen requires foolishness to be an inherent trait amongst his military leaders. On the one hand, it requires much more hand-holding to get anything done. To make sure things are done correctly, you must give explicit and exact instructions every time you give orders. On the other hand, not a single one of them has questioned the need for a labor force, especially one made entirely of orcs. I sighed as I entered my newest domicile. I had meticulously crafted several well-thought-out answers to their potential questions, and had even gone so far as to plan assassinations if those answers hadn't been accepted. A pointless effort, as it turned out. I truly am surrounded by incompetent fools. Well, perhaps not. The officers commanding the squads would have had their wits about them to avoid the orkish trapsters they had. For a moment, I considered promoting them, but dismissed the thought almost immediately. They are far enough down the chain of command to be afraid of questioning orders. If I promote them enough, this will change, and I will have to get rid of them. No, they are far more useful where they are. I was lost in these thoughts when something out of place caught my notice. I stood still and examined the room around me. My sister's cage was nestled in the corner, undisturbed. The hatch to our freshly dug storeroom lay undisturbed in the other corner, still closed and latched. The wooden walls were still covered in the various animal heads, herbal wreaths, and other eccentricities. The wooden walls were still covered in the various animal heads, herbal wreaths, and other eccentricities that the previous denizen had placed there. A gentle breeze was moving the blackened curtains that I'd ordered hanged. The breeze was coming from a window that had previously been closed. Having found the disturbance that wrestled me from my thoughts, I took a step towards the window. "Good evening, Master General," an obviously fanged mouth said behind me. I briefly froze, but fought my fear. "Hello, Allergus," I said, turning to the vampire. "How fare you this evening?" Allergus Tavini, a vampire that told me. Allergus Tuvini. Allergus Tivino, the vampire that told me of my father's death, had been a count when the vampires had ruled the Night Kingdom. "Good morning, huge dinosaur. Hope you're doing well." Had been a count when the vampires had ruled the Night Kingdom. Before that, he had been a muscular but otherwise unimpressive specimen of an elf. Were it not for his obviously elven features, one could easily mistake him for a tall dwarf. The window that he had entered through allowed for enough of a breeze to stir his cosmetically. The window that he had entered through allowed for enough of a breeze to stir his cosmetically straightened light brown hair as his green eyes glowed at me in a barely disguised contempt. Oh, fair enough. At least it's not. It's a me Mario. It's a me Alex is a lot better. In a barely disguised contempt. I would be faring far better had I not been assigned to a whimsy of a half-breed. Allergus practically snarled. "What do you need from me, whelp?" Anger, rage even. It shot through me like a white-hot iron in my skull. My politeness had been met with hostility. How dare this disrespectful reprobate address me in this manner? I felt the urge to attack the vampire. I've been feeding regularly, but it would be a close fight, and it would likely spill out into the camp. My upper echelon hadn't thought to ask any questions until now, but even they aren't dumb enough to have no questions about a vampire attack this far south. Not to mention the fact that I would definitely have to bare my fangs. It would also be difficult to have another vampire assigned to this task, especially once I explained what happened to Allergus. I would have to come up with a reasonable cause for my attack on him, and losing my temper would not be considered reasonable. I will resist his baiting for now. "Yes, I do have need of you. At this moment there is a captured orc digging out a chamber beneath this lodge," I calmly explained. "I need you to find 2 of them that would be sympathetic to our cause and turn them. My officers have chosen a few to be leaders of this labor detail, so you should start with them. They are the ones you're clothing." They are the ones with clothing. Use your hypnosis to determine if they would be loyal. If so, turn them. If not, make them forget the encounter.
What's the point of only turning 2 of them? He asked haughtily. Another downside to having subordinates who are somewhat competent is that they waste time by demanding explanations.
These orcs are part of the first labor group, and their work is not finished. If you turn all of them, we will not have a catacomb to build the new vampire army. Vampires make poor slaves, after all.
He recognized my last sentence as an insult it was intended to be, and his eyes flashed red in response. But he didn't do anything other than just stare. Instead of joining him in a stare-down, I took my seat and gestured at a freshly installed hatch. As far as my officers are aware, the orcs are digging a storeroom for our supplies and loot. They didn't ask why I needed a personal entrance to what would become our cache, and so I hadn't offered an excuse. The red glow in Allergis's eyes faded, and he sucked his teeth at me. Then he entered the hatch to go down on about his task. I chuckled at my minor victory over the pompous arsehole. He would do as he was told, and the plan would move forward. He might skip over the obvious choices for conversion, but I'd planned for that as well. If he didn't choose the orcs that were already in charge of the labor force, those orcs would die and the vampires would take their place. The storeroom is also to serve as housing for any slaves that we capture. A competent commander would immediately be alarmed at putting all the eggs into one basket like this, but no such commander was in my army. Once the storeroom is large enough and we have enough slaves, it will suffer an intentional accidental collapse of its own 2 primary entrances. It'll suffer an intentional accidental collapse of its 2 primary entrances. This will ensure that everyone in the army believes the slaves to be dead. These 2 vampires will then convert the rest of the slaves, creating a nice little army of vampires. This army will then finish digging the 3rd entrance to the storeroom, and we will then take our leave of this area and meet with the rest of the vampiric forces to lay waste to Corilla, the capital of the Night Kingdom. King Lofen will die, and the rest of the Drow forces will be trapped between the enraged orcs and the bloodthirsty vampires. Even with the tactic that I have trained them on, Even with the tactics that I've trained them on, they'll be eradicated. If I'm lucky, they'll do enough damage to the vampiric hordes to make it easier for me to destroy them. Trap the Drow forces between the vampires and the orcs, then trap the vampires between the orcs and my loyalists. Or I could bide my time and play politics amongst the vampires, waiting for a better chance to strike. That would be a far more dangerous option, though. No, there is no reason to delay. The campaign to destroy the remaining Drow should take a few months. I'll seize my prize. Ooh, excuse me. That coffee is fighting back. I'll seize my prize for killing King Lofen, and with magical intervention, I'll have a small army of brood by the time the Drow warriors are dead. That will supplement the Drow forces that are loyal to me and awaiting my call, and we'll move to exterminate the vampires. I rested my elbows on my knees and cradled my hands as I studied the map in front of me. Directly to our north was the Night Kingdom. Our foothold doesn't extend that far into Blurpus, one of the 5 chiefdoms of the United Chiefdoms that we are aware of. There are more to the south, but they are of little concern to King Lofen, and as such aren't of any of my maps. Blurpus, Yerna, Havros, Mogras, and Kokena, the capital. These are the chiefdoms that Lofen once conquered every once in a while. Each chiefdom has their own military forces and a great chief to lead them. In Kokena, the great chief is called High Chief, and he rules over the other chiefs. Oh, that's interesting. Huge dinosaur. Like those eels that, not eels, whatever they are, that live near the vents in the bottom of the sea. The chiefs. I think they're eels. I could be wrong. Of the other chiefs. And also the most likely life on Titan? I stand to be corrected, though. Blurpus and Yana share a border with the Night Kingdom, and they take turns being invaded. The only reason we aren't met with regulars at the border is because it was supposed to be Yerna's turn this time. I chuckled softly. If King Lofen demands an explanation, I'll simply say that I was confused and invaded the wrong chieftain by mistake. I doubt he's paying much attention, though. The hatch in the corner opened, and Alurgus. The hatch in the corner opened, and Alurgus exited the storeroom. The hatch in the corner opened, and Alurgus exited the storeroom. He let the hatch fall noisily and kicked the latch closed. Then he turned and affixed me with a glare. "It is done," he said. "Good. That is all I needed," I said with a condescending smile. "You may go." I was treated to another shift from green to red eyes as the vampire debated whether or not to attack me. If he did, I wouldn't have to worry about the other vampires making a fuss if I killed him. I still have to come up with an explanation for my soldiers, but I'm willing to live with that. I tensed in anticipation. Disappointingly, the creature snarled and morphed into a cravat and attempted to exit through the still open window. I chuckled. I was just thinking it would have been funny if he just closed the window. When the vampire went down, just close the window, don't let him know, and so the bat flies into the window. I chuckled as he struggled with the heavy black... okay. I chuckled as he struggled with the heavy black curtain until he finally managed to complete his exit. I stood and walked over to the window, closing it. Another part of the plan completed. End of chapter. Hydration. My brain didn't even register that the background music wasn't playing. Yeah, it's to clean my vocal cords, so it's a little bit of sunlight liquid mixed with some bleach. It's a joke. It's gamer subs. But in my world, it's just caffeinated, not water. Very caffeinated, not water. I think this one is called Chug Juice or something. The other one that looks like a bottle of piss, that's one of the other flavors. But I drank that one first, so I didn't have to drink the bottle of piss on camera. Well, the background music also just hides the deadness of the silence in between talking. Our brains don't... It's good that you don't register it, but yeah, I think you register silence more. And then I don't feel the need to fill the silence by talking, if I don't have to. Yeah, for some reason the hydration stuff isn't great here. In South Africa, what do we have? Calcivita. Calcivita? Yeah. No? Yes. No. There's a whole... If you go to Dischem, there's a whole bunch of hydration drinks with and without caffeine. Not so much here. So, I decided to give Gamer Subs a try. They're okay. The flavors are okay. Edible. But there's enough caffeine in there to kill a small child. Which is good. Not killing a small child, caffeine. Caffeine's good. That's fair enough, Karen. I'm pretty sure that rehydration is not a problem here. But it's just, even in the chemist chair, they don't have that stuff. Amazon has it, but they're very expensive. Yeah, well. It's just only caffeine. I'm old enough that sugar is actually a problem, so caffeine, caffeine, caffeine. Sugar-free caffeine. Although all Gamer Sub stuff is sugar-free. Or artificial flavoring sugar. It looks like they're about 5 degrees less than Johannesburg, on average. Which is not bad. But also, this seems less harsh, but it could just be because we're more coastal. I don't know. No, I've never tried sprinkling the powder on frozen fruit, but I don't eat a lot of fruit. Most fruits and my acid reflux don't go together. So I just normally avoid fruit. Oh yeah, no, it does. Yeah. Apples are okay. Apple juice is also okay, but that's pretty much it. Almost everything else. So it's like when you have an allergic reaction, you just avoid the stuff. Same with me with fruits. Never really been a big fruit person, but now there's even more reason to avoid it. Persimmons. Nom nom nom. No. I don't even know whether I have persimmons here. Lychees were fine as well. But eating only lychees gets old very quickly. I'm trying to remember specific persimmons. Persimmons? Yes. That one. Is there in Portugal? I don't know. Look, my acid reflux gets affected by a lot of stuff. Well, I'll give them a try. I don't know whether they're available here. It's like we've got 2 fruit trees in our yard. One is, well, actually 3. We've got lemons, which are going to destroy my acid reflux. We've got oranges, which destroys my acid reflux. And algarve, I think. Algarve. A tree. Fruit. Huh. This is all Gov fruit. We got one of these trees. My wife likes it. I don't. Also, it's acidic as well, so sets off the acid reflux. So we've got 3 fruit trees that I just cannot eat. Figs. We do have a fig tree. So I haven't had figs in years, so we'll try that one when it happens. Used to have fig and fig jam when I was a kid. Would be interesting. Been a long time since I had figs. Gaviscon. Gaviscon Advanced is the better one, but Gaviscon is the stuff that I use. It's what my surgeon, well, everybody recommends for acid reflux. The advanced Gaviscon. For some reason, they don't sell it in the liquid form in large quantities. You can only buy the sachets here, which is a bit weird. But I used to go through a liter a month. I had to take it a swig with every meal, and then a big swig before bed, so that the acid didn't eat away at my vocal cords again. Okay, let's move on to the next chapter. Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest narration of the web series. Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this narration of the web series The Human from a Dungeon. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 37. Ooh. Australia. Space Australia. Okay, Ifrian Spas. There you go. Call it that. That is the Gaelic term for space hell. Chapter 37. Dave W., that's a pretty good question. The reason is, several years ago, my channel was demonetized for reusing content. The only content that I ever reused was my intros and outros. So now I just do it manually so that computers don't think that I'm just reusing content. There's enough variance in my voice every day that is not considered reused content. Because, you know, algorithms and YouTube are stupid.
Chapter 37. Because I used to actually have like several different phrases or beginnings, all humorous ones, and I would just alternate in between the different intros. But YouTube is the fun police, and, no one's allowed to have fun. Chapter 37. Nick Smith, Adventurer Level 7, Human American. So Bollisher is the kingdom, right? I asked. Yes, Renford said. So what's the name of the city that we're going to? Yulk chuckled. It doesn't work that way with the Earls of this kingdom. The whole thing is Bollisher. If I remember right, it's a tradition that dates back to their founding. That's right, Renf said. The first High Dragon ruler of Balasar was notably terrible at names. Instead of admitting to his fault, she opted... Instead of admitting to the fault, she opted to name everything under her direct control Balasar, after herself. Even when her kingdom expanded, the new territories were renamed Balasar. None of the rulers of Balasar bothered to rename anything, and now everything that is part of the kingdom is Balasar is simply known as Balasar. Maybe high dragons are just bad at naming things, I joked. Everyone chuckled. It goes a bit beyond that, though, Ren said. Not only is everything Balasar, there are no borders within the kingdom. Everything functions like the big city. That explains why the fair folk like it so much, Nash muttered. Why? I asked. Because borders can be an issue with them. Because... I suppose there was no Australia in old Latin times. Although I'd imagine Australia comes from some form of Greek or Latin. Why? I asked. Because borders can be an issue with them, York explained. Sometimes the Fae and Fairy get trapped within the imaginary lines that we mortals insist upon. There are people that believe in borders, then the more people believe in borders, the harder it is for them to cross. Balasar is a kingdom, so they have plenty of room to roam and grow. I kind of feel for the ones who get trapped in a forest. How did you have that forest get smaller and smaller as towns and cities grow around them? Nash said. It's usually the weakest of the fair folk that end up in that kind of situation too. What about Tartars and Algebron? I'm not sure, York scratched his chin. It could be that the road goes through their forest and as such is part of it, or maybe they're a type of the Fae that isn't restricted by the power of borders. According to the maps that we have seen, the deep wild forest does not extend over the road that we traveled when we counted the Fae. York's second hypothesis is slightly correct, Ten said. Yeah, you're probably right, I said to York and Ten both. I sat and watched our surroundings as we continued to the heart of Balasar, where I sat back and watched our surroundings as we continued to the heart of Balasar, where we would meet a high dragon. I wondered what it'll look like. Will it look like a dinosaur with wings like the dragons in European folklore? Or will it resemble a snake like the dragons of Asia? Or will it look like something else entirely? Will it wake up and talk to me? Or will something else happen while we're looking at the dragon? I've been trying not to think about my dream. The thing that told me to go see the dragon, whether it's good or not, gives me the creeps. It said that there's a bunch of other things like it watching me too. It's been hard not to think about that during the bathroom breaks. Suddenly, it occurred to me that I had forgotten to tell Ten about my dream. I hadn't had a chance to tell Nash or York yet, but I don't have that excuse with Ten. Maybe I should... Maybe I just sort of assumed it already knew, since it's in my head and everything.
Ten, do you know anything about the gods? Ten? Oh, hello, dog. You opened my door. What do you want? Hey? What you want up? Okay. I'm attached. I can't move. Say hello to everybody, Dougie. Woof woof. Woof woof. Woof. You cold, my puppy. When you cold? You've been playing outside. Been playing outside. Lick, 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 lick. Okay. Still gotta work, my pups. Okay. Okay. Here we go. And he's asleep. I so wish I could do that. Maybe I just sort of... Maybe I just sort of assumed it already knew, since it's in my head and everything. Pen, do you know anything about gods? I asked. Gods and religions are not part of my knowledge base. Why? When I used all my magic and passed out, I had sort of a dream, except that it wasn't really a dream. It was more like my mind had been transported to somewhere else entirely. Sometimes... something that I said... Something that said it was a god brought me here. It said that Yook's going to decline an invitation to see a high dragon, and I shouldn't let that happen. When I was out, did you notice anything weird about my brain? There was a notable pause before Ten finally said, I did not. It appeared to me as if you were simply unconscious. Were there any indications of a wild dream or something? No. The brain activity that I observed wasn't indicative of dreaming. Isn't that odd? Yes. But your dream may simply be a false memory that you obtained upon awakening, likely as a way to cope with the trauma that you had just experienced. If it is real, though, I would suggest a modicum of caution. We have little to no information about the gods and their intentions, and it would not be wise to do as they demand blindly. You're probably right, but I'm still going to convince Yook to see the High Dragon. Really? Yeah. Call it a hunch, but I feel that it was telling the truth this time. And if I can't trust my feelings, then I'm probably too far gone to be resisting it now, right? The only sound effect this dog makes is snoring. Yes, I'm looking at you. It's a lumberjack. Then went silent, instead of laughing at my somewhat dark humor. I allowed myself a small smile before I noticed that the trees around us were getting larger and larger. The trunks were also getting wider, so wide that it took an entire minute for us to pass one, and it wasn't long before the trees began to block the sun. We're here, Imlar said to the cart. We're here, Imlar said as the cart stopped. I looked around and noticed that we had stopped at a building that had been carved into a tree. It had a sign with a coin on it hanging above its door, probably indicating that it was some sort of trader. Further down the road, there were many other similar buildings, all with lights adorning them. The visual was surreal. All right, let's deliver our letter, Nash said, climbing out of the cart. Yook, Renv, and I followed suit, and Imlar waved happily at us as we started to walk away. Yook and Nash were examining signs as we walked. It was like they were looking for a specific one. We walked past one with a plate on it, and Ren's stomach growled. You're still following. Yeah. Instead of like vicious snarls, it's more like a me, 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 me. Me, 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 me. Stomach growled. You're still following us? Nash asked the dwarf. Well, once you conclude your business here, I was thinking I can take you to my uncle's shop to see about a reward for saving my hide. Renf grinned.
Plus, I'm curious to see what your lot get up to.
Do you know your way around?
Nope, I've lived down south anyways, and haven't been up here in over a year. I'm pretty sure my uncle upgraded to a bigger building recently, but I've got no clue where it is. That's okay, Yook said. He pointed at a building with a sign depicting a pen and paper, attached to a large table with several harnesses. As we got closer, we could hear the ruckus from commerce taking place. Nash and York entered the building first, and Renf held his hand out in a gesture indicating that I should go first. I did so, and the smell of fresh ink and paper hit me like a ton of bricks, nearly making my eyes water. Inside the buildings were bookcases behind a counter, several desks, and many elves and gnomes rushing around. Most of them were wearing a uniform, light tan shorts and a tunic with a green symbol of pen on their breast, and I assumed that they were employees of whatever business this is. Those that weren't in uniform weren't rushing around. They were waiting in line in front of the counter, or sitting in one of the desks with an employee. The customers, I assumed, would say something to the employee, then the employee would write. It took a few moments for me to realize that the customers were probably dictating letters or something. I glanced at Ash, remembering his illiteracy. He saw me glance at him and he looked around, then gave me a harsh glare. I looked away, trying not to smile. He grumbled something as we took our place in line. What's this place?
What is this place? I asked Yulk.
It's a mail office. They offer dictating services, reading services, delivery services, and since they know where everything is, they can give good directions, he explained. Which is why we're here.
Directions to the Regent?
Correct. I haven't been here before, so I don't know where Regent Oakmar does his business.
I thought... Greetings... Oh. I thought you'd been to Bolasar.
I have, but not this part of it. My business was with a certain sorcerer who built a tower in the forest, far away from any signs of civilization. She was much friendlier than you would expect from a hermit.
The sorcerer you're talking about wouldn't happen to be Almira the Eternal, would it? Renf asked.
Yes, the very same. She taught me how to use healing magic, York said with a smile. It seems like forever ago. How do you know her?
Holomar's one of the healers I was talking about sharing your discovery with. She's one of Oakmar's advisors now. She'll probably be around here somewhere. I'll check when I ask for directions to my uncle.
How'd she end up as an advisor to the Regent?
She said it was because of the past. Turns out the tower in the wilderness occupied by just one person is a great place for bugs and rodents. One day she went into her cellar to find a nest of giant rats, and she lost it. Demolished the whole tower and then and there, and dug her savings out of the rubble and moved here. Didn't take long for Oakmar to offer her a job. Why is she called the Eternal? Why is she called the Eternal? I asked as we moved closer to the front of the line. She's a vampire, York and Renf said simultaneously. They looked at each other and chuckled. Oh, how does a vampire get blood when they're living as a hermit?
Delivery services, York said. There are plenty of people willing to sell their blood, and the vampires who prefer not to injure people are more than happy to pay for it. Enchanted ice boxes keep the blood from rotting during transit. There's a service... There are services like that, I asked incredulously. Vampires just sort of order from a catalogue or what? I don't think the services offer specific blood types, but you'll find that such a service in nearly every territory. Sometimes they're even endorsed by the local government. It wouldn't do to have their vampiric citizens feeding on you other citizens. I had more questions, but the person ahead of us finished their business, and it was suddenly our turn at the counter. As we approached, I realized the bookcases had letters in them, and there were gnomes very busy sporting. And there were gnomes busy sorting those letters. A Burnett elf smiled at us, but York stepped forward. Nope. A Burnett elf smiled at us, and York stepped forward. How can I help you today? She asked. We need directions to Regent Ugmar's place of business, York explained. We have a delivery for him. She explained that all we had to do was follow the main road and look for a building with a sign that depicted a tree. The tree was apparently the symbol of Bolliser, and marked government officers and officials. She was also kind enough to tell us that if we went further down the main road, we would find a sleeping dragon. Now She highly recommended taking a guided tour if we got the chance. Thank you, York said, and stepped aside so Renv could have his turn at the counter. We waited for the dwarf to ascertain his uncle's location, and then left the post office. As we walked down the main road, I wondered how things were going to unfold. I assumed someone is going to invite us on a tour to see the dragon, and York is going to decline this invitation. I'm going to have to somehow convince him to accept the invitation. That's going to be hard, because I still haven't had a chance to be alone with my brothers and explain my dream to them. There it is, Nash said, pointing at a building. Most of the buildings were with within hollowed-out tree trunks. This one, though, looked like it was made of very old stone. It reminded me of the kind of stone you see a castle made out of in a fantasy movie. There were also plenty of people on the road, but none of them seemed at all interested in going in or out of the building. The doors were made of metal, iron probably, and swung open surprisingly easy as we entered. The first thing I noticed within the building was the distinct smell of stale paper, like the air within the building had been here for years and had been reading all the books. The room we had entered was smaller than I expected, and there were 8 doors, 3 on the walls to our left and right, and 2 on the wall from behind. 3 on the wall. 3 on the 3 on the walls to our left and right, and 2 on the wall behind the desk in the middle of the room. There were 2 people at the desk, a male and female elf. The female elf was sitting behind the desk in a serious expression. The female elf was sitting behind the desk with a serious expression on her face, and the male elf was standing off to the side reading some papers. York and Nash approached the desk, and I followed them with Renv trailing me. Excuse me, we are here to deliver a missive from High Chief Ullamark to Regent Oakbar. Is he in? York asked politely. That would be me, the male elf said with a laugh. What a coincidence. I was just reading up on the situation with the Night Kingdom. May I see the missive? Here you go, Your Highness. York passed the letter over. Regent Oakbar took the letter, opened it, and began to read. The woman sitting behind the desk watched the interaction, but was glancing at me every now and then. I smiled at her, and she froze for a moment. I smiled at her, and she froze for a moment, but smiled back and politely looked away. As I suspected, strange happenings must be afoot. For my blood brother to ask for reinforcements, Oakbar said after a moment. You know, he once fought off into one of these invasions single-handedly. Meanwhile, make certain this missive gets to Field General Yom, with the instruction that he take his soldiers to Ullamark's aid. Yes, Your Majesty. Also, she trailed off, and subtly pointed at me. Oh, the human! Oakbar slid between York and Nash with a speed that shocked. Oakbar slid between York and Nash with a speed that would shock lightning. He grabbed my hand and vigorously shook it a few times before saying, What a pleasure it is to meet you. What a pleasure it is to have you visit this mighty kingdom of Bolliser. I've been simply dying of curiosity ever since I heard about the orcs discovering you. Ullamark says they found you in a dungeon. Is that correct? Yes, I managed to say, despite my shock. Nash found me, and Yuk revived me. Nash and Yuk? Oakbar asked. That would be us, sire. That would be us, sire, Nash answered, gesturing to himself and Yuk. Truthfully, what? Truthfully, why, that sly papa managed to send me the whole set. Tell me, did the situation with the monster in the dungeon ever get resolved? Last I heard, Ullamark was sending over 20s. It did, Your Highness, York said. Nick is the one who killed it, actually. Nick? Oakmar inquired, with confusion before looking back at me. Oh, yes, of course. You must be Nick, then.
Yes, sir,
I said. It is simply wonderful to meet you. Please accompany me to my office. I'd like to hear more about your adventures thus far. Nash and York glanced at each other and shrugged slightly. It would be our pleasure, Your Highness, York said. End of chapter.
I'm not snoring anymore. I moved too much. Alright, that's the next chapter done. Lots of new people. Welcome, welcome, hello. That reminds me of every single bit of homework I ever got. Greetings, Lazy Comet. Welcome, welcome, hello. I hope your sleep and meeting go well, and thank you for popping past. Much appreciated. Oh, not 68. That is the wrong number. No. Alright, on to the next chapter. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest narration of the web series The Human from a Dungeon. If you are new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 100, not 100. Chapter 38. High Chief Ulamark, Adventurer Level NA, Orc Kokenian. Baron Blurpress? I asked it incredulously. Not Yerna. Great Chief Torman nodded gravely. The greying orc in front of me had ridden night and day to bring me the news himself and begged my aid. Quite a feat for one in his advanced years. But he had done so to make certain that I would not decline his request. He had given of himself to ask. Fair enough, Lazy, fair enough. But he had done so. Swing shifts can mess things up quite easily. Would not decline his request. He had given of himself to ask me to do the same, and it would be the highest form of disrespect to ignore this.
Of course, I had no intention of ignoring or declining his request, but the fact that he rode here himself suggests that he thinks otherwise, which means I need to make it clearer to my great chiefs that I stand with them. Their struggles are my struggles. This line of thought must stay here. Their struggles are my struggles. This line of thought must have shown on my face because Tolman gave me a knowing look. Ullamark, I rode here because you... Ullamark, I rode here myself because my harnasses are faster than the scouts, and I don't trust anyone but myself and my son with my harnasses. Since I'm too old for the field, I sent him to lead and came here myself. Get out of my head, I grinned. Cheers, cheers. Fair enough comment, fair enough. Get out of my head, I grinned. I'll send the regulars and redirect our allies. How's your boy doing? He's had better days, I'm sure, Tolman sighed. Wants to be an artist, not a general. His paintings and sculptures are fine to look at, too. He really cares about his craft. The look on his face when I told him that he was required of him was grin. The look on his face when I told him what was required of him was grin. He didn't argue? No. Grum's a smart boy. He knows that if he doesn't take charge, there's a good chance that many of our people will lose their homes and their lives. He won't allow his aversion to responsibility to cause our people to suffer. I'm glad to hear that. How's things on the front? They've captured a settlement in a village. Rofen must have finally sent a competent commander. Because they're using shield walls and pikes, and we haven't won a single skirmish. They won't pursue us either, so our traps and tricks have been ineffective. The best we've been able to do is convince them to pull back. The mention of shield walls made the hairs on the back of my neck raise. I'd been hoping that I was wrong about the vampires, but phalanxes are one of their favorite formations. It could be a coincidence, but this along with the fact that the drow aren't sticking to any of their patterns is alarming. Tolman noted my silence and thoughtful expression. You don't think? His eyes went wide as he trailed off. It can't be the vampires. You don't think? His eyes went wide as he trailed off. It can't be the vampires, can it? How could they have infiltrated Lofen's inner circle? Tolman is old enough that he was raised in stories of his father's fighting against the vampires of the Night Kingdom. He had even personally led a charge against the remnants of their threatening of borders. He had even personally led the charge against the remnants that threatened our borders. Of all the great chiefs, he was uniquely qualified to know how dire a threat the vampires can be. I don't know, but it's not outside the realm of possibilities, I said. Roven's paranoid, but he's also an idiot. His criteria for choosing his generals is well known, and it wouldn't be hard to take advantage of that. But how can this be? Drow can't be turned, and there isn't a single non-Drow noble in the entirety of the Night Kingdom. Roven's not stupid enough to make a vampire his general, right? I don't have answers. It could be the Drow in question is simply working with the vampires, or it could be that Lofen couldn't find a general amongst his nobility and hired a mercenary. Regardless, something is definitely off about this invasion. Have there been any reports of vampires in the field? No, none at all. There's that, at least, I said as I rubbed my chin. So either I'm wrong about my hunch that the vampires are at work here, or Lofen is unaware of the vampiric influence of his invasion. What if he's dead? Tolman asked. Can't be. Can't be. Can't be. One, I would have heard about it. What if he's dead? What if he's dead? Tolman asked. Can't be. One, I would have heard about it. Lofen doesn't pay his staff well enough to keep their silence. Two, there is a functional Drow army. The nobility of the Night Kingdom wouldn't be able to pull that off without Lofen. Those strings are too fragile for vampires to be able to yank them. It's a mystery, Tolman sighed and leaned back in his chair. Still, doesn't change what must be done. Blurpus must be defended. What are we going to do about their shields?
Shields won't help them if they attack your keep. But for a field, we may want to look into a mounted mages, I suggested. Or axes. Axes would probably be cheaper.
They're using pikes and spears. The axes have trouble closing in. I like the idea of the mage cavalry, though.
Yeah, but we don't really have the infrastructure for that sort of thing.
The guilds might. They've got to know some adventurers that can use magic and ride harnesses.
Sure, but it's going to be costly. Won't be a long-term solution to this kind of combat. Can't expect this to work. Can't expect this to be a quick war.
Tormund laughed. You should use that overly large head of yours to find a way to encourage mages to join the regulars. Then we wouldn't have to worry about this kind of thing.
My head isn't overly large, old one. Yours is just small.
I grinned. Then a thought occurred to me.
Magic users like to study and learn. It helps them with their casting. Maybe a school or something. Charge tuition and offer waivers for military service.
The guilds would probably have an interest in that. Might even be willing to pay extra taxes to help fund it. See? Big head, big ideas.
Raisin!
I shouted, ignoring the jab from Tormund. Raisin quickly popped his head through my door. Yes, High Chief?
I need a meeting with the leaders of the Adventurers Guild and companies. I need a meeting with the leaders of the Adventurers Guilds and companies. If they want to continue operating in the unified chiefdoms, they better get here with speed.
Raisin nodded and closed the door. Tormund raised an eyebrow at me. Tormund raised an eyebrow at me and then grinned.
You'd banned them, he asked. Damn right, I replied. Most of them are tax dodgers anyway. All I gotta do is send the auditors and they're done. They're well aware of that.
Tormund nodded and chuckled. The truth is, most of the guild leaders are respectful and will come when called regardless of whether or not I make threats. And will come regardless of whether or not I make threats. While it is true that the majority of them definitely do not pay their legally obligated share of taxes, they still understand their place in the world. A handful of them, though, do not. They keep forgetting that their wealth does not equate to status here in the unified chiefdoms, and Kokena especially. If I didn't threaten them, they would ignore me. They would ignore me. This would force me to do some rather unsavory things to teach whoever replaces them not to repeat their mistakes. My father once told me that if I could avoid being cruel, then I should do so at all costs. Fear naturally follows respect, but respect does not follow fear. He generally knew what he was talking about in regards to governing, so it's advice that I heed.
School for magic, Tormund said thoughtfully. How long do you suppose it'll take to make? That depends almost entirely upon the mages, I replied. We've got some empty buildings that would do the trick. The Uli Trade Union building is what I'm thinking of.
The Uli finally gave up the coast. Thought I'd never see the day.
Yeah, they've been done for a while now. Thankfully, it was a slow decline, so it didn't hurt the economy too much when the boys shut the doors.
The Uli Trade Union had been a multinational trade organization that began a long time ago. My great-grandfather had given the seal of approval for the construction of the gigantic office. A series of scandals and bad business decisions had started their decline during my father's time, and I had signed the paperwork that forgave their debts and closed their doors.
What are the Uli boys up to these days? I don't know. Part of their debt forgiveness was the requirement that they forfeit their property and leave the chiefdom. They didn't tell me where they planned to go.
Tormund snapped his knees.
So one more thing before I go. You met with the thing they dragged out of the dungeon? Sure did, I grinned. He's a human.
A human? What's that?
Well, looks kind of like an elf, but with round ears and a few sharp teeth. Didn't really get a chance to talk to him very much, because I had him deliver a missive to Borisov to request aid against the drow. The reports say that he's a... The reports say that he's from another world, and that world is full of humans like him. Oh, and they can eat meat and veg.
Weird, Tormund frowned. You sent him to Bollisaur by himself. He's that strong?
Yuld says he's a level 7 already, but no. I sent him along with Fleshcarver Yulder's boys, Yuk and Nash. Nash and Yuk. She adopted the human, you know.
No shit, Tormund laughed.
Haven't heard from Yulder Alta in decades. Any word on how she's doing? From the sound of things, she's enjoying the quiet life. Can't begrudge her that. Not after what she gave for it.
Too true. So the human, think he's dangerous?
Probably, but not to us. He seems pretty amicable and level-headed.
That's good to hear, Tormund said as he rose from his chair. So long as you've got some idea as to what you're doing with the human, I'm fine with whatever you decide. I should get back. I nodded solemnly as he turned to leave my office.
He paused for a moment at the door. Should I accompany you?
I asked, trying to guess the reason for his hesitation. He turned to look at me with a little bit of shock. I suppose I'd guessed wrong, and it hadn't even occurred to him to ask. My prowess on the battlefield is well known, and even though Tormund and the rest of the great chiefs are big orcs, I tower over them. Tormund met my eyes and then looked at the mountains of paperwork on my desk.
I don't think so, Ullamark, he answered with a grin. Things are not quite so dire as to give you an excuse to get away from the paperwork. Well, there's just so much of it, though, I said with an exaggerated frown.
Tormund and I laughed for a few moments before things settled down into a somber silence.
When you enter the field of battle, it'll be indicative of failure on our part, Tormund said. We'll do everything in our power to ensure that you get to enjoy your paperwork. Goodbye, High Chief. Goodbye, High Great Chief. Goodbye. Goodbye, Great Chief.
Tormund left the room, and I sighed. I'd known Tormund since I was a child, and it pained me to see him as an elder now. The massive orc that had sparred with me and shocked me with his speed and power was now too old to even accompany his son into battle. Still, I felt a little beam of pride that he liked my idea for a magic school. Maybe we could do more than one and have the schools compete with each other to further motivate their students. Maybe we could do more than one and have the schools compete with each other for further motivation. Maybe we could have more than one and have the schools compete with each other to further motivate their students. No, I doubt there'd be any need for that. The knowledge of magic alone will be more than enough to motivate, well, the knowledge... Oh, excuse me. That, gamer subs is growling. Or was it the dog? It's the dog growling, yes. It was definitely the dog growling. I doubt there'd be any need for that. The knowledge of the magic alone will be more than enough motivation for most students. Hell, maybe once things get going, I'll take a class or two. Find out if I could have been good at magic or not. My gaze fell back on my paperwork.
Perk!
I whispered to myself as I picked up my pen. A knock on my office door saved me from the looming task at hand. Raisin poked his head into my office. Hi, Chief. 2 of the guild leaders are here to see you, he said.
Which ones?
I asked. Pumas, of the Adventurers Guild. Pumas and the Adventurers Guild.
Send them in. No need for introductions.
Raisin nodded and left the room. The Adventurers Guild and Pumas Union were the 2 largest guilds in the unified chiefdoms. The Adventurers Guild was much larger than the Pumas Union, though, because their operation was multinational. Even so, the Pumas Union was no pushover and even offered mercenary services that the AG didn't typically bother with. There are a lot of areas in the UC that wouldn't have any sort of police if it weren't for Pumas, and the easiest way to become a guard is to join up with them. A gnome and an elf entered the office. A gnome and an elf entered my office and bowed. The gnome is a Malura Grinsnow. The gnome is Malura Grinsnow, and she is the head of the Pumas Union. The elf is Jirway Horfu, and he is the master of the Adventurers Guild. I gestured for them to take a seat, and they happily complied. There are two things we need to discuss, I said, once they were settled. They subtly glanced at each other. I could imagine what they might think of this meeting about, and how nervous they both were. I had to fight a grin. First is the situation with the Night Kingdom invasion. I need mages that know how to ride harnesses while casting. They will be pressed into service for the remainder of the invasion, but they will be well compensated for their efforts. Eyes widened and eyebrows shot up. It had been decades since adventurers had been drafted, and my willingness to impose upon their freedoms indicated a dire situation. Melura opened her mouth to say something, but quickly closed it again. It'll be done, High Chief. Your way, said. Your way. Your way, said. So the rumors are true, then? I don't know what the rumors are, so I cannot say, I replied. What I can say is that the Drow are using tactics that we are ill-prepared to respond to, and they invaded Blurpus instead of Vierna. We are planning on utilizing a mage cavalry force to tip things in our favor. Mounted mages, I'll be damned, Melura said. The second thing we need to discuss is the possibility of a school for study of magic. It'll be an academic institution dedicated to instructing mages on the magical arts, both to further the common knowledge of magic as well as to bolster the caliber of our mages. Funding will be done through a mixture of government subsidies and tuition, with tuition waivers offered by completion of military service. Good morning, Rev. 988. Stop shouting at me. Good morning, Rev. Hope you're doing well. Thank you for the kind words. Of military service. The two guild leaders maintained their shocked expressions. Whatever they had thought this meeting was about, I was demolishing their expectations. Melura recovered first this time. How can we help, High Chief? She asked. I need teachers and administrators that are well versed in magic. It is unclear how many we'll need as of yet, so I want you to make a list of who's qualified and who may be interested. You said government subsidy, High Chief. How will the chieftain be getting the funds necessary to start this Academy of Magic? Yuraway asked. Oh, that's quite simple, I said, with a malicious grin spreading across my features. I'll just be needing you to pay a bit more of your fair share of taxes. Some estimates put your payments at around 30% of what you should actually be paying. If you bump that up to 40%, we'll be able to afford the academy, and I won't have to send the auditors. Their stunned silence was music to my ears. Military service. That's great, because I didn't record any of that. Just give me a second. Need to take my bandage off. Comfortable. All right, we're going to do that again. This time with the recording button going. Oh. Military service. The two guild leaders maintained their shocked expressions. Whatever they had thought this meeting to be about, I was demolishing their expectations. Melura covered first, this time. How can we help, High Chief? She asked. I need teachers and administrators that are well versed in magic. It is unclear how many we will need as of yet. So I want you to make a list of those who are qualified and who may be interested. You said government subsidy, High Chief. How will the chieftain be setting the funds? How will the chieftain be getting the funds necessary to start this Academy of Magic? How will the chieftain be getting the funds to start this Academy of Magic? How will the chieftain be getting the funds necessary to start this Academy of Magic? Yuraway asked. Oh, that's quite simple, I said as a malicious grin spread across my features. I'll just be needing you to pay a bit more of your fair share of taxes.
Some estimates put your payments at around 30% of what you should be actually paying. Some estimates put your payment at around 30% of what you should actually be paying. If you bump that up to 40%, we'll be able to afford the academy, and I won't have to send the auditors. Their stunned silence was music to my ears. End of chapter. That works. Huge dinosaur. That works. Alright, I'm just going to pop out quickly. I will be right back. I'm back with the dog again. Alright, there we go. Hopefully no feedback from the headphones. Yarg! Thank you very much there. You're Rev 9886. It's very much appreciated. The booty treasure. It will be put into a trunk and... Oh. Yep, that was just disappeared. Well, I'm glad that you enjoy, and thank you very, very much for the super chat, Rev. It is much appreciated, adding to the hoards of treasure that will be buried on an island. Yarg! Cheers, huge dinosaur. I will see you when you get back. Alrighty. Just make sure everything is where everything needs to be. Okay, everything's back, I think. Mostly. We've got 2 more chapters to do. And we have a dog. I think we can accomplish this. Human. Where am I? 39. Itchy nose. Itchy nose. Alrighty, on to the next chapter. Hello, hello, hello. As I stood up earlier, I bumped stuff. So the feedback is not coming through properly to my headphones. Coming through perfectly to the software. Just can't hear it properly. Greetings, ladies and melogents, and welcome to this latest narration of the web series. Well, I'm glad that you enjoy it. I think we sorely miss people telling stories these days. Just in families and stuff. But I know my grandfather and my dad, both phenomenal storytellers. Used to love that shit. Still love it. I think it's a skill. I had, not only just a skill, what would you call it? A family tradition that's kind of lacking in this modern age. Greetings, ladies and melogents, and welcome to this latest narration. Greetings, ladies and melogents, and welcome to this latest narration. Greetings, ladies and melogents, and welcome to this latest narration of the web series The Human from a Dungeon. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 39. Nick Smith, Adventurer Level 7, Human American. Instead of my office, let us use one of the conference rooms. They're much nicer and have more chairs, Regent Oakmar said as we walked. Sounds great, Your Highness, Nash replied. We walked a little further before the Regent halted and gestured to a closed door. I awkwardly froze, trying to figure out what he wanted, but York stepped past me and opened the door. Oakmar caught my confusion and gave me a single smile and nodded warmly to York before entering the room. I guess maybe royalty doesn't open doors for other people. I worked my way through my confusion as we entered the room. My jaw nearly dropped. Oakmar had described this... Oakmar had described it as a conference room, but that hardly did it justice. The room was luxuriously large, and its stone walls were covered in various banners, one of which I had seen while in Kokena.
There were various other decorations spread throughout the room, like swords, maces, and a hand from a large clawed monster. In the center of the room was a massive wooden table with intricate engravings that were inlaid with gold. The chairs surrounding the table matched its engravings, but had cushions on their seats, arms, and backs. Their backs were extra tall and reminded me of the expensive reclining chairs that influencers peddle for ridiculous amounts of money back home. Just a side note, those chairs are horrible. Get a real chair. Get an office chair. They're cheaper and they're better for your back. This is an office chair. I can't do a full recline, but I never do that anyway. Unless I fall on the floor. Then I'm fully reclined. I was wondering if they could recline when Oakmar sat and gestured to his chairs across from him. "Please sit down. We have much to discuss," he said with another small smile. We sat with York to my left and Nash to my right. Rem sat next to Nash and sighed contentedly. The chairs were remarkably comfortable, and I had to fight the urge to melt into their cushions. It's the first cushioned chair that I've sat in since coming to this world. When I get back home, I'm never taking cushioned seats for granted again. Oakmar began verifying the information he'd been given thus far. Yes, I'm from another world. I do, in fact, need to eat both plants and meat. Hilda Alta adopted me into the Alta clan. No, I wasn't technically the one who killed the thing in the dungeon. We came here to deliver the missive and to see if we could get some rubbings translated. Yes, I am desperately trying to get back home, and I miss my family terribly. Well, on that note, are you planning to see our true king? Regent Oakmar asked with an eager grin. Actually, Your Majesty, York began. Yes, we are, I interrupted, surprised at the firmness in my voice. Your king is a dragon, right? I asked a follow-up question to put York into a difficult position. To argue with me, he would have to interrupt the regent. I don't know a lot about monarchy and regency, but I do know that he's been calling Oakmar Your Majesty, and it's usually a bad idea to interrupt someone who requires that honorific. Not just any dragon, Oakmar said, beaming with pride. A high dragon, a normal dragon is fearsome and respectable, one of the most terrible and deadly beasts to ever exist. But it is just a beast. They have intelligence and motivations comparable to puppers or honasses. High dragons are much smarter and deadlier than their less evolved cousins. What do you mean? I asked. I dared a glance at York, who was staring at me. His expression betrayed confusion rather than anger, though. I felt a stab of guilt as I realized he was trying to figure out why I had interrupted him and changed our plans on the fly instead of feeling angry at me for doing so. I didn't bother looking at Nash, though. I can feel the venom in his gaze. High dragons are near divinity when it comes to their intelligence. The legends tell of high dragons' elders accurately predicting the outcomes of battles years before they were fought. While that may be an exaggeration, the high dragons were instrumental in driving the daemons and annuals from our world. Oakmar's tone. While that may be an exaggeration, the high dragons were instrumental in driving the daemons and annuals out of our world. Oakmar's tone took a sad turn. A lot of them died to do that. A lot of them died to do that, though, including the parents of our true king. He avenged him in a glorious battle that lasted for 3 weeks and returned to Bolasar in his coronation. I'm not sure what happened during that battle, but he promptly issued a declaration for regency and fell into a slumber that has lasted ever since. A declaration of regency? Yes. The declaration of regency governs the requirements for my office. Essentially, I act as king in his absence. When I die, there will be an election and a new regent will be chosen. Who chooses the new regent? The people of the land, of course. I paused for a moment. A democratic monarchy sounds alien to me. But on the other hand, I don't really know much about kings and queens. Rather than exposing my ignorance, I opted to ask something else.
High Chief Ullamark says you're his blood brother. How did that happen? I asked. Ullamark and I adventured together in our youth. We had saved each other's lives on multiple occasions, and when it came time for him to take over the post of High Chief, we decided to take a blood oath, the elf answered. At the time, the intention was for me to come to his aid as an adventurer whenever he needed it. Then my father passed, and I was presented. Then my father passed, and I was pressured into running for regent, namely because no one else wanted to. Now our blood oath requires that both of us come to each other's aid for as long as we rule. So until you die, or wait, what happens to you if the High Dragon wakes up? I asked. I will resign my post as regent and take up whatever duty our king offers me, the elf smiled. Or I'll just retire. I have enough savings to last me for the rest of my life, and make sure my children get a good inheritance. Retire? You wouldn't go back to adventuring? Oh, I'm far too old for that sort of thing. Oakmar waved his hand dismissively. Really? You don't look that old. Really, you don't look all that old. Oakmar began laughing, and all three of my companions chuckled along with him. I looked around with a confused expression, seeking an answer until it finally hit me. Even back home, humans don't age all that much. Damn it. Elves do not typically demonstrate our age upon our faces, Oakmar explained as he wiped a tear. Apologies for my outburst. Your question was simply unexpected. I likely have a couple of decades left until I'm infirm, but my adventuring days are well behind me. Good morning, day, afternoon, time unit, Sudsy. Hope you're doing well. Or as well as can be. Behind me. What level did you manage to get to, Your Highness? Nash asked. I rose to level 62, thanks mostly to Ullamark. I rose to level 62, thanks mostly to Ullamark. He could probably return to adventuring if the situation arose. Really? You gasped. I thought he was older than you, Your Highness. He is, but he's also of royal lineage, Oakmar answered, before frowning slightly. But I digress. I'm fairly certain that the details of the royal lineage are secret, so if you wish to learn more, you'll have to ask him directly. York nodded and retreated into his thoughts, rubbing his chin in the process of what he'd heard. Nash furrowed his brows and crossed his arms, also an indication that he was thinking. Ren and I simply looked at the two orcs, confused by their reactions. Now, Nick, I cannot help but notice that you have been omitting my honorific name this... Now... Don't mind you sleeping here, just don't put your head on the keyboard. Kill the stream that way, my puppy. Confused by their reaction. Now, Nick, I cannot help but notice that you've been omitting my honorific this entire time, Oakmar said with a sly grin. I've chosen not to take this as an insult, but I cannot I've chosen to not to take this as an insult, but I cannot help but wonder why. My apologies. Apologies, Your Highness. Nose hairs. Apologies, Your Highness, I said rapidly. I've never met a regent before, and we didn't have royalty or nobility where I'm from. Truly, he asked, with an eyebrow rose. Absolutely remarkable. How are your people governed? I explained the various types of governments in the United States to Regent Oakmar to the best of my ability, which inevitably led to more questions about my world. Thankfully, Oakmar seemed more interested in our various forms of entertainment and food than our technology, so I was able to easily avoid the subject of weapons. In this world, adventurers hold the majority of the combat abilities. They have to train those abilities and hone them to be able to cause massive amounts of destruction. Guns and nukes would change that power dynamic very quickly, and even pointing out the possibility of their existence may eventually lead to someone creating them. Can't be too careful. You can look at cute pets while communicating with anyone in the world almost instantaneously. Oakmar leaned back in his chair.
Marvelous. Simply marvelous. I know it's unlikely to ever happen, but I can't help but wish to see the wonders with my own eyes. Fucking hells, me too, Rev said. I glanced at Rev and realized that everyone else had followed suit. Nash and Yook looked shocked, and Regent Oakmar raised his left eyebrow. The already diminutive dwarf shrank and further out. The already diminutive dwarf shrank even further out. The already diminutive dwarf shrank even further at our various gazes. My apologies, your majesty, he stammered. I didn't mean to swear in your presence. It won't happen again, your highness. See that it doesn't. Though your reaction is more than understandable, Oakmar straightened. Well, my curiosity is sated for now. Please allow me to accompany you to tour... Spooky physics, yes. My curiosity... Well, my curiosity is sated for... Please allow me to accompany you to our true king. Watching His Royal Majesty's slumber may sound dull. There truly is nothing quite like it. The regent rose from his chair, and we followed suit. He led us back to where we had entered the building and whispered something to the woman at the front desk. Her green eyes narrowed at Oakmar with disapproval, but she didn't say anything. He grinned at her and gestured for us to follow him. When we left the building, he took a deep breath. "Yeah, fresh air, it's been so long," he chuckled. "So do any of you know our streets are wider? So do any of you know why our streets are wider than any other kingdoms? So that your king can walk through the kingdom when he wakens, your majesty," Yook answered. "Correct. You, my bright... Correct. You are a bright one. When His Royal Highness first entered his slumber, he did so in a sparsely populated portion of the kingdom, not wanting to get in the way of our growth. However, his subjects love him so much that many of them moved here, and everything was built around him to make sure that he would be comfortable when he awoke. We've even cleared our airspace in case he needs to fly." "How many people live here, your majesty?" I asked. "Our last census has us at 11,000, with a margin of error of 1%. This is the most densely populated portion of Balasar, and we had cities. And if we had cities, it would slightly be our capital. Oh, and don't fret over my honorific nick. I understand now that your culture is vastly different from ours. I'm willing to treat you as a sort of diplomat. Thank you, sir." "Your Highness, I don't see any fortifications which we approached." Your Highness, I didn't see any fortifications as we approached. "Why is that?" Nash asked. "That's because you didn't see our fortifications doesn't mean that there aren't." "Just because you didn't see our fortifications doesn't mean they aren't there," Oakmar winked, "which would be more effective at routing an invading army. A simple stone wall. Which would be more effective at routing an invading army. A simple stone wall, or arrows and spells coming from all over at you at impossible angles. Or arrows and spells coming from all around you at impossible angles." Nash's eyes widened and he fell into a contemplative silence. "We are not invaded often either," Oakmar continued. "Our only two neighbors are the Night Kingdom and the Unified Chiefdoms. The Unified Chiefdoms meet us at the south and west, and the Night Kingdom meets us at the north and west. It's just the ocean to the east. Since the Unified Chiefdoms are friendly with us, our only threat is the Night Kingdom." "Greetings, Caveman 110. How are you doing?" "Hope you're doing well. And don't worry this time, we've still got quite a bit of stream left, so we're not going to run away, just as you join us. Since the Unified Chiefdoms are friendly with us, our only threat is the Night Kingdom. They've tried invading us before, but they rarely make it past the Fae with anything resembling an invasion force." "The Fae fight them?" I asked. "Some do. Most prefer trickery and subterfuge. But those that take pleasure in direct action are quite brutal. The Blood and Bone Fae especially." "Blood and Bone Fae? Do those live in the deep wild forest?" Odd of you to ask that. Oakmar studied me for a moment. No, both the blood and the bone fae tend to live near the outside. No, both the blood and bone fae tend to live along our northern border, in a place the fae call Grimstar's Woods. They have been known to migrate somewhere. They've been known to migrate somewhat, but never so far as the deep wild forest. How are you aware of the fae living there? I explained our encounter with Tartars and Algebron as we continued our walk. The regent waited patiently as I explained their attempts to trick us into giving them our names, and his eyebrows rose as I told him that I named them. He stopped dead in his tracks when I told him that they turned into arch-fae, and the rest of us quickly followed suit. They became arch-fae, he asked. Yes, Your Majesty, I stammered, caught completely off guard by his sudden seriousness. You made them into arch-fae. I suppose so, sir. Oakmar leaned down towards me and studied me carefully. I tried not to lean away, but his peering gaze forced my instincts to kick in. After a few moments of intense scrutiny, the regent resumed his former posture and began to laugh. Oh, by the gods, he said as he recovered. That's going to anger someone powerful, I'm sure. No matter. That's no problem for another time. Let's continue on, shall we? He gestured for us to follow as he began to walk once more. The four of us looked at each other and quickly trailed after the regent. Cheers, Yamashisha. Hope you have a good one. Regent. Who would get mad? I asked. The Fae Chroniclers for sure, but you don't have to worry about them. The only one you might have to worry about is Mamoldabaran. The only one you might have to worry about is Mamoldabron. He's the only one you might have to worry about is Mamoldabron. But he's likely to be more angry at the new archfey than you. He glanced at me and caught the concern on my face. Oh, don't worry about them. Mamoldabran will probably just give them an earful and a hard time for a few years. I was about to ask what he knew about Mamoldabran when a certain smell caught my attention. A musky scent of reptile with a hint of rotten eggs. No, that's sulfur. I looked around for the source of the smell, but it became obvious as we turned the corner. The high dragon looked exactly what I had seen in video games. I was resting. Very much. I'm sure that'll definitely affect the global warming thing, James. AC units for everyone. What I had seen in video games. It was resting on a platform of stairs, curled up with its front legs supporting the base of its neck, and its head resting on its tail. I could barely make out the claws of its hind legs poking out from underneath its wings. Shining white scales covered its body, glimmering in a massive sunbeam, the first I'd seen so far. The only thing that was missing was a treasure hoard underneath it. This is our true king, Oakmar took a few steps and gestured dramatically. Yissenarath, King of Bolasar and Bane of the Horde. My eyes remained on the high dragon as I followed the regent. Its body slowly expanded and deflated slightly as it breathed, causing a sort of shimmering effect from its scales. It was bigger than an elephant, but breathtakingly beautiful. I looked at its face and noticed that its eyes were moving under their lids, like it was dreaming. I was trying to imagine what it was dreaming about when the movement stopped. Everything in my body told me that it was awake and watching me. I felt the blood drain from my face and froze in my tracks. Oakmar and my companions turned to look at me, confused at my sudden halt. The dragon's eyes snapped open, looking directly into my own. End of chapter.
Oh, stretch. Don't worry, dog, I'm just stretching. Just stretching, my puppy. I moved too much and awoke the dog. The dog of death. Not quite death. The dog of snoring is awake. The kraken is awake. No, I'm sorry. You're not a kraken. Stretch. Are you going to stretch too? Okay. Ooh, there we go. How's that stretch? Comfortable. Grunting at me. Trying to be cute. Your breath stinks. Like a dog's breath. You need breath mints. You need a bath, that's what you need. Okay. What? Grrr. Grrr, vicious dog. Yes, it's a microphone. Yeah. What dog? You want out? Okay. Just give me a second. I need to let the dog out. So apparently it was me that let the dogs out. 40. And we got the microphone going. And we're on to the last chapter of The Human from a Dungeon. Greetings, ladies and melogents, and welcome to this latest narration of the web series The Human from a Dungeon. If you are new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Yssilin Wrath, Adventurer Level NA. High Dragon Unknown. Cheers, caveman. Hope you have a good one, and I hope your day passes quickly and without incident. Yssilin Wrath.
Yes, get that out of your mouth. I tried to reply as I spit the befuddled troll back onto the ground. You know better than to eat trolls without cooking them first, boy, my father scolded me. Yes, father. Really now. They're quite filthy. Go wash your mouth out, mother said. The troll looked at my parents and then back at me with confusion. He could not understand what we were saying and looked confused at being spared. It sat there, nonplussed, as if it were one being scolded. As if it were the one being scolded. I dismissively waved a claw at it, which released it from whatever stuporous spell was holding this poor little mind. It rose and began to run, and I walked over to the river to obey my mother's command. Ashamed that my parents caught me. Actually, how did they catch me? They were arguing. They couldn't have been paying attention to me. Never mind. It doesn't matter. Trolls are delicious. They have chewy, juicy muscles with plenty of succulent fat, which makes for a rather perfect mouthful of meat. The bones add a magnificent crunch, too. My parents are correct that trolls are filthy little creatures, but I've never minded the grime. It's just seasoning, really. I dipped my head into the river and drew back with... It's just seasoning, really. I dipped my head in the river and drew water into my mouth. It was cool and refreshing, and it took more than a little willpower to spit my first mouthful back into the river. It took some more. I took some more, swished it around, garbled, and spat once more. Once my mouth was sufficiently rinsed, I gulped down gallons of fresh water, along with a few inattentive fish. Then I laid my back and my wings on the rocks as I watched my parents talk. You can't be serious, Severino. Serenivoro. Serenivoro. Nevero. You can't be serious, Serenivoro. You can't be serious, Serenivoro. Renivoro. 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 Yes, Renivoro. That works. Watch my parents talk. You can't be serious, Renivoro. The daemons have nearly wiped out the owls. What good would it do for us to help them now, of all times? My mother asked. A strange smell nearly distracted me, but I wanted to hear my father's response. My father is wise, but has a blind spot in his wisdom in regards to daemons. He hates them more than I have ever seen anyone hate anything, and my mother is right to worry for his logic. Don't cry my name wantonly, Esmeralda. Don't cry my name wantonly, Esramel. Don't cry my name wantonly, Esmeralda. There is no need for such disrespect, my father replied with a flick of his tongue. Well, it is true that the elves have taken severe casualties that are not extinct yet. Welcome back, huge dinosaur. Glad you are progressing. But it is true that the elves have taken severe casualties. They are not extinct yet. The threat of our extinction is imminent, though, which means that they will be there more grateful for which means they'll be even more grateful. Which means they'll be all the more grateful for our aid. I have no issue submitting to our rule, and we can finally merge our two kingdoms into one. He's talking about Balasar and Yevonita. Balasar is our kingdom, and Yevonita is the independent elven kingdom. In ages past, the elves managed to convince one of my ancestors to allow them to self-govern. Recently, it was occupied by daemons before being liberated by the annuals. Once the elves rebelled against the annuals, and demons quickly reoccupied it. The elves had no royalty left, and very little in the way of nobility. My father has made an excellent point. At the moment, Balasar is strong. The daemons and the annuals have left us alone, with the exception of their skirmishers splitting into our land. Yevonita is ravaged. But if it were to combine with Balasar, we would be able to help the elves rebuild their homes and businesses in record time. And if we don't, it won't be long before the daemons have eradicated the elves and turned their attention to us. That damned smell again. Where is it? I looked around, but there was not a single clue to its origins. It smelled familiar, but also hauntingly alien. It was comforting, disturbing, lovely, and threatening all at once. It's a smell that I feel I should remember from somewhere, but have never encountered before. Or have I? Unable to find its origins, I turned back to my parents. Bah, they are short-minded like the rest of them, they are short-minded like the rest of them, my mother said with a dismissive wave of her claw. They'll be grateful to us this generation, perhaps the next. But by the third generation, they will demand freedom to once again create their illusory territories. We'll barely be better off. It's not worth the risk of fighting the daemons. My dear, the elves that live under our rule are happy. The elves of Yvanita. The elves of Yvanita will see this and be happy as well. The elves of Yvanita will see this and be happy as well. Only those who are mistreated desire independence, and we will certainly be a better option than those damnable daemons. I looked to the sky in contemplation. The daemons. I'd eaten a daemon once. It tasted terrible and took forever to digest. Wait, that's wrong. It is taking forever to digest. All right. This is a dream. Mother and father are long dead, and not even their bones remained. The daemons had made certain of that. I looked back to my parents, and indeed, they were gone.
Yep. Random feck noises.
My father had eventually talked my mother into fighting the daemons, and I had helped. They were both slain during the conflict, and I had lost myself in rage and grief. My wrath was unstoppable. My wrath was unstoppable, and the daemon lord that had taken their lives is currently being dissolved in my stomach. I then became king of Balasar and merged Yvanita into my domain with no argument from the elves. I've been napping among them ever since, leaving them to their own devices. That damned smell again. I awoke, being careful to keep my eyes closed. The daemon in my belly made me tired, like I'd always just eaten a rather large lunch. A benefit to this is that my nutritional needs are constantly fulfilled, but the downside is that it's difficult to concentrate on ruling while I'm in such a state. My solution to this was simple. I decided to name a regent and sleep until I got hungry again. However, sleeping indefinitely is impossible, and every time I awoke, the elves would lose their minds with glee. They would ask me what they should do. They would ask me what they should be doing and how they should be going about it. They would ask me what they should be doing and how they should go about it. They would ask me what they should be doing and how they should go about doing it, and it would take forever to get caught up enough to adequately make those decisions. So I decided to pretend to sleep, even when I was awake, so that they could go about their business. Before I knew it, though, it had been multiple generations since I'd last spoken to the elves. So many generations that I no longer understood their tongue. It would be terribly awkward if I were to reveal my ruse. This smell aroused my curiosity, though, needing to know where it was coming from. I silently cast true vision and looked through my eyelids. I saw the elves had redecorated once again. My view of the sky remained unobstructed, though, and I could see that the towering trees had continued to grow during my latest slumber. Judging from how much larger they'd become, it's only been about 80 years since my last stealthy awakening. Those 80 years must have seen quite the economic boom, too. The hill I've been resting on now had stairs, with roads leading away from me and winding through the streets. I was impressed that they had managed to do this without waking me. On each side of the roads were buildings that were definitely elven, but reeked of gnomes, dwarves, and orcs. Each building appeared to be specially carved from a tree, and with oblivious advertisements and signs denoting commerce. Shops, perhaps. The elves were none the wiser to my awakening and continued about their business. Some children were being led by an adult. Some children were being led by an adult who was speaking in a very condescending tone. Must be a teacher speaking to students. Most of their eyes were wide, which is the proper response to seeing something as gargantuan as grateful as myself. Which is the proper response to seeing something as gargantuan and graceful as I. But others appeared to be bored. I felt the urge to open my eyes and startle the little cretins. I looked around some more and saw another noteworthy group approaching me. 2 orcs, an elf, a dwarf, and something else. I nearly mistaken it for a pig kobold, but it was walking fully upright and seemed to be speaking with the rest of the group. There were 2 other big clues that it wasn't a big kobold, though. Its ears were round, and there was the thing giving off the intriguing smell. Pork smells like prey, so do kobolds. This doesn't smell like prey. I'm not certain what it smells like, but it's definitely not prey. I suspect that it would put up as much of a fight as the daemon in my belly if I were to try eat it. Perhaps even more of a fight, considering how injured this particular daemon had been by the time I decided to devour it. I turned my eyes towards my stomach. Hergeres, the decimator, had been in my belly for over 4,000. Hergeres, the decimator, had been in my belly for over 1,000 years by now. His regeneration abilities had slowed his degradation to a crawl. But there's hardly any meat left on his bones. Even if I were to regurgitate him and allow the regeneration to happen, his mind would never recover fully. The best case scenario for him would be to compose. The best case scenario for him would be a complete loss of memory and faculty. Actually, given his reputation, that would be the best case scenario for everyone. Hergeres had tortured and murdered hundreds of thousands of mer, and the cruelty of his tortures had been more well known than his near immortality. My advisors at the time had told me that he couldn't be stopped. I felt the urge to smile as I turned my attention back to the group approaching me. It had taken a millennia, but I had finally beat the unbeatable. Hergeres had been known far and wide as the immortal Lord of Daemons, and I used him as sustenance until that remained. And I used him for sustenance until all that remained of his identity had been destroyed. A fate worthy of such a fate worthy of such a disrespect. Wow. A fate worthy of such a despicable being. The elf with the group gestured at me, and the smell-bearer suddenly stopped. Its eyes widened in alarm as they made contact with my own. The smell became sharp with fear. It knows. It knows. A spark of fear alit my rage when I realized that this being had seen through my ruse. A potential foe, one that could destroy me if it were allowed to grow. My anger caused me to breathe. My anger caused my breath to quicken, and the smell suddenly became familiar to me. Gods. They were actively watching this thing, and one had even interacted with it. Would they intervene if I were to destroy this thing here and now? Or could it be that they interfered with its fate to bring it before me? Is it meant to be an ally or an assassin? There's only one real way to find out There's only one real way to find out what they're planning. I opened my eyes. The creature's skin tone changed from a slight pink to a pale white, and I noted a small measure of satisfaction that the bored children who had been annoying me earlier were now stunned. The creature's comrades were facing it, but the bald orc slowly tracked his gaze to me. First, his face showed curiosity, then shock. A moment later, everyone except the creature was on their knees. I raised my head to look at it with both eyes. "Why are you still standing, fool?" I asked it. "Do you not know your betters by instinct?" A small measure of confusion managed to peek past the fear that was apparent on its face. I recalled that language had evolved over the years, and suddenly felt a pang of self-consciousness. What good is a king that no one can understand? A small smile crept over the face of the elf that had been guiding the group. My lord, if I may, he asked. I doubt that we will get anywhere if you do not, I said, masking my surprise at finding someone who still spoke High Dracon. The elf stood, put his hands on the creature's shoulders, and whispered something to it. The creature kneeled so rapidly that I heard its knees hit the ground with what to... The creature kneeled so rapidly that I heard its knees hit the ground with what had to be a painful amount of force. My anger subsided at this show of deference, knowing now that it was not arrogance that led to such disrespect. It was either ignorance or fear, both of which can be forgiven. Your Royal Majesty King Yssenrath, I am your humble regent, Visilith Oakmar. May I present to you Nick Smith, Nash Alter, and Uke Alter, the elf said as he bowed down. I've just awoke, and I'm not in no mood for epithets and big words. I have just awoken, and I'm in no mood for epithets and You care what it means. How do you pronounce it?
Magniloquence.
Magniloquence. Okay. Thank you, robotic voice. Magniloquence. I have just awoke, and I'm in no mood for epithets and magniloquence, Regent, I said. You will speak plainly. What have you brought before me that reeks of godly plots and interference? My words caught the Regent by surprise. He paused, then looked at the creature. His shock was so quickly subdued, however, and he turned back to me. Your Majesty, this is a human. He is named Nick Smith, and was found within a dungeon in the neighboring chiefdom. I know nothing of godly plots and interference, I'm afraid, he said. You should be, I spat, my anger flaring once again. One does not become the subject of godly interference ignorantly. Either you are lying to me, or the human is hiding his interference. Either you are lying to me, or the human is hiding his interactions with gods from you, likely at the behest of said gods. I will ask him about it, sire. I made a circular motion with my claw to indicate that the regent should be quick with these questions. The human was hesitant to speak, but after a moment there was discussion between the two. The orc with the braids appeared confused, but the bald one gave the impression that he had been granted clarification. The dwarf looked lost and alarmed during the entire conversation. The regent asked several questions, and once the discussion was over, he explained to me what he had learned. The human had been caught in an explosion caused by bandits, and lost consciousness when he used all his magic to heal his friend. This was when he had met a being that said that it was occasionally called a god. I nodded as he explained that the god wanted the human to appear before me, and that I would put him on the path to returning to his world. This piqued my interest. Not only had the god encouraged this human to appear before me, likely knowing that my curiosity would get the better of me, but it also presumed that I would be willing to help the human in some capacity. I examined it closely, using various vision magics for complete investigation. Everything about it seemed strange. Everything about him seemed strange. The first thing I noticed is that his magic core is completely artificial, and contains much more magic than a mortal's magic core should. Its channels are extremely efficient and lack any sort of subtlety as well. A sorcerer's magical capabilities were often impacted by how efficient these channels are, and as such, the human is likely capable of terrible acts of magic. The next thing I noted is the amount of metal within its body. Within its skull is an object that seems to interface directly with each part of its brain. Floating through its blood, lymph, and bile are extremely small chunks of metal that seem to be moving of their own volition. After examining them closely, I realized that they are extremely small machines performing various tasks. Unlike most machines that I'd seen before, these are not made of iron or steel.
Don't look behind you. Someone's following.
Oh my god. I looked behind me. Thank you very much for the follow. It's very much appreciated. Good morning, Postmatic. Well, as most isekai enjoyers will tell you, the truck, the almighty K-Truck, is the Grim Reaper of the gods in those worlds. Thank you very much for the follow, Burger Joe. Very much appreciated. These are not made of iron or... These are not made of iron or steel, but various precious metals for reasons undeterminable. The final thing I determined is how different its anatomy and physiology appear to be from mortals of this world. Some organs are shared with orcs, others are shared with elves and dwarves. Some have different compositions but seem to perform similar functions. Others are completely unique to the human and serve functions that are nearly unnoticeable. There is also evidence of massive amounts of surgery, but someone had managed to minimize its evidence. It certainly appears to be otherworldly, I told the Regent. I do not know how I would go about aiding this return to his world, though, nor am I inclined to try, given the circumstances regarding this request. I must beg your forgiveness and mercy, my liege. The elf placed his forehead upon the ground. The circumstances behind this boy's presence in our realm are tragic, and it would pain me dearly to see his quest unfulfilled. I dare not pretend to know the motives or missions of the gods, nor do I presume to begin to imagine the reasons behind your disdain for them. But I cannot help but beg your grace, sire. You dare beg, my grace, with the very same epithets and magniloquence that I told you to abandon mere moments ago, boy, I demanded with a low growl. I'm sorry, he replied. This isn't how I imagined this would go. Memories of elves of old bringing me gifts and gratitude for saving them from the daemons flooded back to me. They were ecstatic whenever I would awaken from my slumber, and even host feasts to celebrate. The small stab of guilt pierced the emptiness in my heart as I realized that even after several generations had passed, my people still loved me. Very well, I sighed. Explain the human circumstances to me. Regent Oakmar elaborated on the reasons behind his feelings, sparing no amount of drama in his retelling. A boy, stolen away from his aiding love and transported to a strange world where he obviously does not belong, with no recollection of his relocation. With no recollection of his relocation or knowledge, or of how to return. With no recollection of his relocation, or knowledge of how to return, despite the Regent's garish bardic skills, I managed to feel some empathy for the human. I had been a youngling when Balusar went to war against the daemons, and my world changed forever. I remember how lost I felt when my daily decisions went from mundane to grave in the blink of an eye. I had my parents to guide me through the transition, though the human does not. I will consider it. How would my assistance be applied? I asked. Before Oakmar could answer, something unexpected happened. Excuse me, Your Majesty, Nick said. Can you understand me now? End of chapter. A fancy word to mean fancy speech. Seems legit.
Seems perfectly legit with the English language. Likes having phonetic with PH. Just to feck with people. Well, that is going to be me for the day. 3 hours, 5 chapters, 14,000 words. Thank you all for joining me. It's very much appreciated. In this economy where attention is pulled in every direction, spending your time with me, like I said, is very much appreciated. And honestly, enjoyed. I hope you all have a great one. I'll be back tomorrow. Unless we break the power system again. Then I'll make a plan. I'll still be back tomorrow. Anyways, I hope you all have a great one. And I will see you all then. Cheers.